Welcome to the next episode of Endoscopy Essentials. I have a very special guest, my old friend Michael Bretthauer, because he's from Germany as I am. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
Michael, we thought, you have been supporting me quite a bit in this podcast scientifically and also as an interview partner. We thought I would like to present to you a little bit where you're coming from, what's your background. You're from the area or from the city of Göttingen, right?
Yeah, that's
in
right.
Germany?
That's right. I'm from Lower Saxony, which is right in the middle of Germany. Used to be right at the border to East Germany in the old days when I grew up. But in the new Germany, it's right in the middle. Yes, that's where I was born and raised.
People there are proud to speak the purest German without accent and dialect.
That's correct. It's they speak Hochdeutsch, which is one of the few areas where actually you don't speak dialect. So yes, that will be my the language that I am still speaking, and I was raised in. And it's interesting because I've been away from Germany for so many years, and we will talk about that. Just recently, I was invited here in Germany to give a talk, and somebody came to me after the talk and said he was so impressed that my German was almost perfect.
So I mean that's a good question. If you live abroad and speak a different language with family, etc., how do you keep up your German?
Yeah.
Do you read a lot or?
Yes. Yeah, I read. I read German books. I also read a lot of English and Norwegian books or language. I read German newspapers every day on my phone. And of course, I speak to my family, and sometimes I speak to you on the phone in German. That's what
Okay.
keeps me almost fluent.
So call me every time you need some practicing. Your family, do you come from a medical background?
Not at all. I'm the first one in the family who went to university. So there's no academic tradition in my family. My parents and also my grandparents. My grandparents had a brewery, and my father took over when my grandfather died, and eventually stopped brewing beer, but was selling beer and other beverages. Quite a big local, but quite a big company with trucks and people and driving out, and that's where I have a younger brother. And it was a family business. We were helping out and I remember we were complaining about it every Saturday, every Sunday. We had to help out and be in the store. But it was also, in hindsight, very nice because it kept the family together.
So it was an early form of microbrewery?
You could say that, yes. Yeah. At the time there were a lot, and now it's coming back with this micro. At the time there were a lot of breweries, and this is a small town I'm coming from, and every town had their 1 or 2 breweries where people were brewing beer and selling to the local people. Yes.
Wow, good.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in medicine? Was this your first choice, or did you do something else before?
No, not at all. Thomas, another feature with me is that when I was a teenager, I was doing a lot of sports. I was doing kayaking, and for some years that was really all I did. So I was doing a lot of kayaking, training 2-3 times a day, very professionally. I was in a very good team. Eventually, I came to be a member of the extended national team in Germany at the time for teenagers, which was a lot of fun and a lot of socializing. That's how I learned life, traveling around with this group.
Away from the family.
Europe, away from the family. But the consequence of that was that I didn't really prioritize school that much. So my grades were poor. And I remember a teacher, this was in high school, and usually we were traveling with the kayak team from Thursday night to Sunday night. So I was never at school on Fridays. And at the time, there was school also Saturdays in Germany.
Was that accepted?
I was never at school. Well, it was kind of accepted. They didn't like it, but I guess I was convincing, or maybe my mother helped me. And I remember grades were to be set at the end of the half year, and this teacher, I think it was in math, he said to me, "Look, I don't know what I should give you, what kind of grade, because you're never here. So I don't know. So I put you in the middle of the scale." And
Which
that's
was
where
fair.
I was. I think it was fair. But of course, it's not a good start to get into medical school. So I wasn't even close to get into anything on a high level at university.
Because in Germany, it at least at that time, it almost exclusively depended on school marks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there was one exception. There was a medical test once a year for the whole of Germany. And I got in eventually. This was a little later because I was doing civil service first, and then I was put into the ambulance service. That's how I started to get used to medicine. I was scared to death because I'd never thought of anything related to blood or bile in my life. But I started to like it. I took the test. I was amongst one of the best here in Germany with the test, and got in only by my test results and not by the grades, because the grades were terrible from high school.
So you started from below, actually. So you were exposed during the civil service and said, that's something, that could be something for me.
At the time, this was the Cold War. We're just ending the Cold War. I started 88. The Berlin Wall came down in 89, so it started in 88. And at that time, you had to do 3 years, either 2 years of military service or 3 years of civil service. I chose civil service. I didn't want to go to the military. I didn't like that. And the government just put you somewhere. First, they put me to drive handicapped children to a day center. And then half a year later, they said, "Now you're going to start at the ambulance." I was like, "Really?" Yeah, okay. So what do? You go there and you try to make the best out of it.
That's not a bad way into medicine.
No, it was great.
Because otherwise, it's like a continuation of school. It's chemistry and physics and
Yes. No, it was. I mean, in hindsight, it was great. At the time, I was just scared to death. I didn't know what to do. But you just go along. You have no choice, Yeah.
And then you finished your studies and left the country pretty soon.
Yes, so I was studying in Göttingen, which is a small town, an old university town.
But a very famous
university, yes, and a very nice education. But I figured, you and I have talked about this over the years. I figured that Germany, at least at the time, there was too much hierarchy in this country for me. I've always been this person who asks questions that some people don't like. If I don't understand a thing that people tell me, I would ask, why is that? And how does that fit with this or that fact that contradicts what you're just saying? And I'm usually not very smart in distinguishing who you may not ask these questions. For example, a professor when you're a medical student. Sometimes that is not appreciated. If a medical student asks these questions to a professor, and I see that today because now I'm a professor myself, and now sometimes I'm getting annoyed by these young medical students who pretend to know everything and asking me all these nasty questions. I was that guy many years ago. And it wasn't good for my career at the time at the medical school. I was also there sometimes getting bad grades, although I knew everything, but I was just annoying. And I didn't like that, obviously. So I thought I try another country, another part of the world, and see if it's better there. That's why I decided to move away.
And why Norway?
Norway was a coincidence, really. I wanted to go to Sweden because I had a girlfriend at the time who was Swedish, and I was there some summers, and I was, just volunteering at hospitals. Many people do that as medical students, and I felt that the hierarchy was not as much as in Germany. It was a flatter structure. I liked the people. I also liked the north, so I thought I would go there, and then there was a lot of stuff happening, and I ended up, because somebody called me from a small hospital in Norway after medical school and said, we are looking for somebody as an intern. Can you come up next week? And I didn't have anything else. So I thought, yeah, why not? So without any knowledge of the language, of course. Yeah, that
Or,
was.
or did you speak Swedish a little bit?
I spoke a little bit Swedish, which is similar to Norwegian. It's like two different dialects of the same language. And I emphasize I spoke a little bit of Swedish, and it's a little different to Norwegian. So in essence, I was really useless the first months when I started as an intern. I had a hard time. My patients had a hard time. The nurses had a hard time. And looking back today, I think it was really a bad decision of the people who hired me to hire me at the time.
But they were kind enough to schlep you through, obviously. And
there was a big shortage of young doctors at the time. So I guess they thought, either we have nobody or we have this guy who is really, maybe just performing at 20% of everybody else's performance, but it's better than zero. I don't know what they thought.
Have you ever spoken to them?
I've
afterwards?
spoken to some of them, and Norwegians are very kind people, and they used to. This was on the countryside, very small hospital. They used to the fact that people coming from all over, and they have to help people to perform. Also, young medical doctors. So they were very kind and saying, "Well, but Michael, eventually you did well, and you learned the language fast, and you were putting in an effort." Which I did. So it all turned out okay, which is true. But still, I think it was really bad the first months. And I met my wife there, and she's honest with me, of course, because she also started as an intern. And she's telling me when we talk about this, yes, you were useless.
But having a girlfriend in the country helps as well.
Yes,
that's right. But this was outside of Oslo.
This was about 3 hours south of Oslo, small county hospital, which was good because you're learning a lot. Because after 4:30, 5 o'clock, you are on call, once a week, twice a week, and you are alone. So you have to do everything, which has to be done. You do your rounds on the intensive care. You have the ER. You have all the wards, and it's a very good, very tough, but very good, was at the time, very good learning area.
Is the Norwegian system as such that people are at least encouraged, or it's obligatory that they start in smaller hospitals and then go to the big ones, like in Switzerland, I think?
Yes, at the time they changed it recently, but at the time and until just recently, it was a lottery. So after medical, it's a European system, 6-year medical school, a little bit different from the US system, 6-year medical school. And after that, everybody has to have an internship of 1.5 years, 6 months of internal medicine, 6 months of surgery, and then 6 months of GP service. And let's say there's 1,000 spots, and there's 1,000 people coming out of medical school. And then there's a lottery where you are placed. So you just draw, and then you get spot number 1, you can choose. And if you get spot number 1,000, you get the last one, which is left. So people are spread all over the country.
So the hospital can't choose anybody whom they may like. He might go to Tromsø or wherever.
Yeah, wherever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how did you make your way back to, or not back, but your way to Oslo?
Well, so I stayed at that small hospital actually for 6 years. So I did my internship, and then I started briefly. I was at the anesthesia department because that's what I wanted to do originally. Because I had been, remember some years earlier, I had been at the ambulance service, so I knew all the the anesthesia, the acute things, and I liked the pace of it and the practical things. I liked that, and felt very comfortable with all the with intubations, with putting needles here and there, and CPR. This was my world. Helicopter, I thought very
flying doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started there for 4 weeks, and then suddenly I found that very boring, because when you realize what the anesthesia people do, they're often in the OR, and they put the people down, and then they just wait for the surgeon to be ready with whatever they are doing. And I suddenly felt, oh no, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I switched over to the medical department, and then went my way around the internal medicine education, did all the, I was on the cardiology ward, and then lung people and the hematology. It was a very broad education. And then I was picked up by a gastroenterologist, Guy Hoff, who was doing some research and was running the gastroenterology department. And he said, why don't you come to us? I'll teach you endoscopy, which I really didn't know anything about. I had seen it, of course, but not more than that. But I thought, yeah, he seemed like a nice guy, which he still is. And I thought, yeah, sure.
So it's again a mentor.
Yes, it's a mentor.
Yeah?
The group was nice. They were nice people. They were friendly. They had a lot of fun together, which I think is important. You spend a lot of time at work. So I just, and they trained me, and they were, again, they trained me in colonoscopy. Started with colonoscopy, actually, which was unusual. But so I liked it. And after 6 years, I had done a lot of endoscopy. I was almost finished with my PhD because I started that there. That was the time when the big sigmoidoscopy screening trials were done, and one of them was in Norway at that hospital.
And Hoff was one of the decisive figures.
Hoff was the PI of that trial and one of the opinion leaders in the early days in the colon screening field. This was back early 2000s. And then after 6 years, me and my wife decided she was pursuing surgery, that we wanted to go to a larger place. And then we went to Oslo, and I started at the University Hospital, where I still am today. Yeah.
Okay, so research also started very early, and
It did.
big scale research, right? Screening is not a little thing, one guide wire against the other, or snare, or that's the often pursued endoscopic research. It's the big topics.
That's true, but it was also, I was starting at the GI department, and they trained me in endoscopy, and there was this big trial where thousands of sigmos and colos had to be done. So what do? You help. And then when you're doing not clinical service, but you're doing endoscopy in these trial patients. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same polyps, and it's up and down, and it's the technique. But suddenly you are exposed to the research side of it. And then I started to, and this is interesting. At the time we were using, most people were using air. You remember that time for insufflation, both during upper and lower, and of course a lot of people were bloating. It was uncomfortable, at least for long-term procedure. It wasn't good.
Yeah, the hours after colonoscopy were
Terrible.
not fun.
Yes. So my mentor, Guy Hoff, he said, why don't you do some research with CO2? Just look at CO2. Christopher Williams at the time in London had used CO2, and some people had done some uncontrolled case here with CO2 instead of air insufflation, but there was no randomized trials. That was an area that nobody had done good research. And I thought, I can do that. That's interesting, because I was seeing it all the time, every day, that people were struggling with the air that we were pumping in. So I started to design these small randomized trials within the big screening trials, where I just randomized people to CO2 or air. And obviously, I mean, the difference was striking. It was like these trials where you don't need 1,000 patients.
Yes.
You just need 50. And then you see the difference is so large, you can just stop the trial.
There were many following and all showing the same.
All showing the same, yeah. That was the start how I got into research, and then also right into randomized trials, because it was obvious that was the design one should choose to find out.
Was that the mentality within the research group? So you also had infrastructure, because when you are young, you don't know how to do that exactly, and you also need mentoring in this respect.
Yeah. Guy Hoff was very visionary. A lot of things he just put up, and he was very practical. I remember we went to this factory that a big Norwegian firm which is doing a lot for the oil industry, because we didn't have a CO2 insufflator. We didn't know how to do that. So we just went there. We were driving the car up, and he knew somebody and said, can you build this for us? And they said, yeah, sure, we can do that. We didn't ask any, now with MDR, we didn't ask anybody. They just built it for us.
These were the good old times before CE marking.
We took it back to the lab, started using it. Yeah.
Okay. And then, what I really admire about you is that you are one of the most focused endoscopists I've ever met, because most of us try to do too many things, do sophisticated therapeutics, many hours in the endoscopy department, then the evening a little bit of research. obviously, at some stage, you had to decide
Yes.
to pursue the classical endoscopic career or focus on research and still do a bit of endoscopy, but not very time-consuming one.
Yeah. I was doing more or less full-time endoscopy for about 10, 12 years, including nights and weekends and all, ERCPs and everything. That wasn't then in Oslo. There's a great unit, so I got taught all the things you need to know about advanced endoscopy. But then, just as you said, the research part was becoming too big, and I saw that if you really want to do good research, it needs to be done professionally. So not like after 5 o'clock, not only on Saturdays. You cannot do that professionally. So I needed to decide.
Especially with a family, etc.
Oh yes, that of course. And yes, wife, kids, and yes, but regardless, I think you can. I don't think it's possible to have 100% endoscopy career with everything, all the advanced stuff, and then to be a world-class researcher. I don't think it's possible. At least for me, I saw that's not possible. So I made that, and it was a tough decision. And sometimes, just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Poland and watching my friends there to do all these procedures that I don't do anymore, which was, it's kind of hard to see because I thought, well, I would like to do that as well. I would like to do it well. I know I could do it well if I train, but I have decided I don't do that anymore. I do the research, and I still do normal colos and gastros, but at a much lower level than what I was used to. But that was a conscious decision, and for me, I think it was the right decision to prioritize the research and to scale down the endoscopy part.
Also, one has to say that the type of research you have been doing up to now, these big screening trials, I think they are way more demanding than a interventional randomized trial. Which also takes time, but
they are. Yes, absolutely. But I think, again, if you really want to do it professionally, regardless if it's a 100-patient trial or a 10,000-patient trial, you need to do it. Maybe not full time, but you need to dedicate a lot of time to it. You also need to build up a team, and when you build up a team, like we did in Oslo, we are now more than 30 people who work at the research group. You are the boss of these people, and you need to dedicate time to them, to explain them how to do things, how you want them to do what they are supposed to do. And you cannot do that after 5 o'clock or on Saturdays. You have to do it when they are there, when they are in the office or wherever they are. And they know very quickly when you are not devoted to it. When you're just running away to another ERCP, they don't like that, and I understand that. So you have to be there with them.
I see that. The message is a little bit bitter for us practicing endoscopists, but that's how it is.
Yeah.
And at least I think it would be good that more of us realize that it's a serious business. Should be a full-time business, and if you're the head of it, and you're right. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think we deserve it also because at the end. Everything we do is for our patients, or if you will, for society at large. I mean, it should be fun for us, and we should get well paid and all that recognition. That's fine, but we're doing it for the patients. And because we're doing it for the patients, we're doing it for somebody else. And some of the interventions we do are dangerous, potentially dangerous. We have to be professional about it, both on the clinical side and on the research side.
It wouldn't be accepted that you do a side job as a therapeutic endoscopist, right?
I don't think so, right? For good reason.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And then, we have been talking about this in several podcasts, was the huge Nordic trial. Was this just a logical continuation of the sigmoidoscopy? So
exactly
you guys said, well, now we go for the full colon and see.
Yes. We were done with the sigmoidoscopy trial. That was 2002, 2003, with all the procedures. And then we were thinking, okay, what's now? And then colonoscopy at the time, still many people said it's impossible to do colonoscopy screening. People will not accept it. It's too dangerous. The bowel prep. It's just. But people started to talk about it in the US. They were already starting to do it. So we thought this would be a right time to start a colonoscopy screening trial. And then we started to draft a protocol, talk to people. It takes years, of course, to set this up. We didn't actually start the trial before 5 years later, but we started talking about it at the time. So for us, it was a logical continuation of what we had done with sigmoidoscopy. Exactly.
Okay, the rest is history. Back to your private environment. You're living in Norway. That's a special country. One of the most interesting stories you told me, I wasn't fully aware, was the detection of oil in the North Sea, both at the coast of UK and Norway.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, and obviously I didn't know much about Norway before I moved there either, because, as I said, it was just a coincidence. But I learned later, and it is indeed an interesting story. So, just as you said, so Norway was back in the '60s, early '70s. It was one of the poorest countries in Europe, then oil was discovered off the coast of Western Norway, which is the sea between Norway and the UK, just as you say, between Norway and Scotland.
By American teams, is that correct? Or
yes,
teams with involvement of American?
Yes, because they had the knowledge. The Norwegians didn't have the knowledge to drill, and this is far down at the bottom of the ocean. And there, so first you have a kilometer or two of water, and then you get to the bottom, and then you have to drill. It sounds almost as complex as endoscopy. So American people, they took in people from Texas or from the Gulf, and they drilled and they found oil. And then the Norwegian government, so usually it is, you drill, you find oil, and then usually the countries of the world license the findings to private companies, to Exxon or Shell or British Petrol, and they exploit the oil. They earn most of the money, and then they give a little bit back to the country because that's where they are. The Norwegians at the time, I think, were very courageous because they said to these people who had found the oil, thank you very much, bye-bye, we're going to exploit this ourselves as a country, as a governmental company. We will not have private people in here. We will own this ourselves, from the oil all the way to the petrol stations of your car, which was unheard of. It was unheard of.
Because in parallel, the same happened close to the UK shore.
On the UK side, they did it the traditional way. They asked Shell and British Petrol, and they took over the business. They paid a little bit to the UK government, but the vast majority of the share went into private hands. The Norwegians started what they called Statoil, so the governmental oil company, from nothing. There was nobody. And now it's a huge company. It's now called Equinor. It's a world-leading company with many, many 10,000 employees. But they did that because they said, no, we don't want this in private hands. We want the people of this country to get all the revenues, which they still do. And now what is called the Norwegian Oil Fund, it's really the pension fund. So it's if you will, the retirement money of the population of Norway. It's the largest fund in the world, and it basically finances a lot of the country's business, of the government's business, which I think is very interesting. And some other countries have done that after Norway. Some of the Middle Eastern countries do that. Venezuela has tried that, but was not very successful. But for Norway, it has been very successful and very different from what the UK did at the time.
Because the current framing, or the framing for a number of years or almost decades, is private is effective and state-driven is slow. And that is Norway an exception, or is that just wrong framing?
I think it's all about the right leadership. I don't think per definition that public companies, public service is inferior to private service. There's no reason for that. The reason is the leadership is different. So if you apply a leadership which is good in public service, you will get good service out of that as well. A leadership which is visionary, which is seeing and exploiting opportunities, which is finding new solution, and which hires the best people into that public service company, then it's a no-brainer that you can get the best service out of it. It's just all the money then goes to the people and not to the private shareholders.
Okay, so back to healthcare. It's a paradise. You can afford everything, or
no, it's not a paradise. It's not a paradise, but it is a good country to live in. It is a good country for the vast majority of people, I think, for a larger majority than in many other countries. There is public healthcare, which it's not free. You have to pay a little, but not much really. So it's basically almost free. And the service is good across the country. But there are waiting lists. There are a lot of these features that you have in other public healthcare systems. So it's not perfect by no means. But I think it serves the people well for relatively small costs. Now, for people like you and me, and the people who listen in, who are mainly doctors and specialized doctors like us, we do stuff that not many other people can do. For example, advanced endoscopy. The pay for somebody like me is a lot less than, let's say, what I would earn in America or in Germany, where there's a private system. So for me personally, if I look at my payment, my salary, it's a disadvantage that I work in such a system. But for the country at large, I think it's an advantage. For my kids, it's an advantage because they go to good public schools. But for me, I could earn a lot more in America as compared to Norway.
So there are pros and cons. Sort of final question: when you come back to your country of origin, maybe focusing on the health system because the rest is too wide. What do you feel? Has it changed?
It's a very good
the
question.
hierarchy thing, as far as you can judge from talking to friends and people.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'm always trying to observe that because I find it very interesting. And I'm not in Germany too often, but I'm there maybe once or twice a year, and I always like it because it's my heritage. Although I've been away for almost 30 years. So it always feels like home in a way, if you understand what I mean, which is a good feeling. So I try to observe, has it changed? How is society now as compared to when I left? I think, and I try to talk to young people to find out, which I think is a little difficult now because when they know I'm the professor, I sometimes I'm not sure if they really tell me what they think. So, and oftentimes when I, visit your unit or other units, people know who I am. And that sometimes prevents, I think, them from talking freely. But my observation is, coming back to your question, is I think there's still a lot of hierarchy. I think it's slowly maybe getting better, but I think there's still a long way to go, unfortunately. That's my impression.
That's interesting because we have the impression a lot has changed.
Yeah.
We have a shortage of young doctors. So the leaders have to accommodate, and there are these stories that the young people are dominating, and so on and so.
Yeah.
But the observation from outside is
No, I don't see that.
Okay.
I think it takes a lot of time to change culture, and this is a cultural thing. It takes several generations, I think, and I hear that people in our generation say, oh, the young doctors today, they're very demanding. They don't want to work. They want to go home to their family. They're not as good as we were. I heard the same thing from my professors 30 years ago. I think it's just us aging and not them being much different.
Yeah. And the same complaint 2,000 years ago, or even longer.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. That was a very nice conclusion. Michael, thanks so much for being here. And I'm really looking forward to further podcasting with you.
Thanks so much for being here.